Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through stacks of sources, pull out the key nuggets, all to help you get instantly well informed. Today, we're diving deep into something that's, well, truly the backbone of our economy, the world of small business. The incredible ingenuity, the sheer grit that goes into that daily grind, the constant need to adapt, the immense pressure. Small to mid-sized businesses, SMBs, they face it all every single day. So this deep dive, it's going to be a really crucial look at the reality on the ground for these vital players. A candid look at the challenges, definitely, but also, a celebration of their resilience.
Absolutely. And this isn't just like high-level theory or those broad economic headlines you might glance at. This is really rooted in direct insights from the front lines. Our main source today is Revenue's 2025 Small Business Survey. It's really comprehensive. We're talking insights from 171 SMB owners. And these aren't just abstract numbers, right? These are real-world experiences, kind of custom-tailored to help you listening right now really understand the current landscape, the hurdles, the unexpected ones, and maybe most surprisingly, the optimism that keeps these entrepreneurs pushing forward.
Yeah, exactly. Our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to unpack the biggest challenges these businesses are really grappling with. We mean everything from, the squeeze of rising costs, unpredictable trade policies, to those persistent supply chain disruptions and that constant struggle for access to capital. But here's what I find fascinating. Amidst all that pressure, we're also going to highlight the honestly surprising optimism, the innovative solutions they're finding, and just the sheer determination that's driving them. Think of this as your shortcut, to really get the landscape for SMBs right now. Practical takeaways, real-world examples, stuff that really hits home.
And we really want to balance those key data points, the numbers, with the human stories behind them. That's crucial. We'll explore how profit margins are being, relentlessly squeezed, the evolving, often volatile nature of supply chains, that ongoing struggle for capital access, consistent, affordable capital, and like you said, that remarkably positive outlook despite it all. It's definitely a complex picture, no doubt. But our goal is to make it clear for you, actionable, and hopefully really compelling.
Okay, let's really dig into this then. You hear businesses talk about this environment feeling like a pressure cooker. And one of the biggest pressures, maybe one people underestimate, comes from tariffs and trade policy. This isn't just political chatter, is it? It's actually hitting daily operations, the bottom line, for so many businesses.
Oh, absolutely. It's far from theoretical. It's a very tangible reality for them. The survey data, it's incredibly stark here. A significant 67%, two-thirds of SMBs, said they were directly impacted by tariffs in just the past 12 months. Now, what does that actually look like, on the ground? Well, it shows up in a few critical ways that just eat away at profits and efficiency. First, you've got higher costs for goods, for materials. That hits margins directly, forces tough choices on pricing. Then tariffs often cause these major delays in inventory and fulfillment, and that creates this ripple effect, right? It hits customer satisfaction, delivery times, production schedules, just overall efficiency. It cascades. And maybe the most disruptive thing for many, it's forced supplier changes or even losing suppliers altogether. Right. Imagine the disruption, the higher cost, the uncertainty of scrambling to find new, reliable sources in this kind of market. It's immense.
67%. Wow. That number really hammers home how pervasive this is. It's not just a few specific sectors getting hit. It means only about a third of SMBs weren't directly affected, which feels surprisingly low, actually, given how diverse small businesses are.
And you're right, that impact isn't spread evenly. That's a really important point. Some industries, some regions, they're really bearing the brunt of these policies. If we look at industries, construction and manufacturing, they're particularly exposed. A striking 78% of them cited significant cost increases on really crucial raw materials, copper, steel, lumber. And to make that real, we heard directly from a construction owner in Texas. He said, and I'm quoting, "Copper wire costs spiked 25% in 2 months, and we had to resort to stockpiling materials just to control prices." Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Tying up cash just to get basic supplies.
Wow, stockpiling. That's a major shift in how you operate.
It is. And similarly, retail businesses, especially the ones relying heavily on imported inventory, they're feeling huge pressure. 71% reported delayed shipments and serious supplier disruptions. There was this quote from a New York retail owner. It just perfectly captured the frustration. She said, "It feels like we're constantly chasing new rules. We can't plan ahead, and every delay hurts our customers." It's that constant uncertainty, the inability to plan. That's what's so debilitating for them.
And it affects manufacturing too, right? Things like medical equipment, auto parts.
Definitely. Across manufacturing, medical equipment, automotive, furniture, 74% cited those tariff-related cost pressures and inventory delays. It's very consistent. For retail, specifically consumer goods, apparel, toys, wholesale, 68% noted their profit margin shrinking because they had to absorb the costs rather than passing them all on. They just couldn't risk losing customers.
So even service businesses aren't totally safe.
Not entirely. You might think professional services, IT, healthcare, education would be insulated, but no. 41% reported an indirect impact. It comes through inflation-driven costs, or their vendors hiking prices because their costs went up due to tariffs. Like the cost of specialized medical equipment might jump because of tariffs on imported parts, or IT hardware gets more expensive. It really shows how interconnected everything is. You can't escape it completely.
As a definite ripple effect.
Okay, and you mentioned regional differences too. That makes sense, thinking about ports and imports.
Precisely. Geographically, it plays out as you'd expect. Coastal states, California, New York, Florida, with their big ports and stronger import dependencies, they're seeing the biggest impact. A substantial 72% of SMBs in those states reported tariff-related delays. Compare that to 58% in inland states. It's a noticeable difference. Their direct link to global supply chains just makes them more vulnerable to these kinds of trade shifts.
Okay. And what about businesses that rely on just one main supplier overseas? Are they in a tougher spot?
Much tougher. But there's a really clear and frankly concerning link there. Businesses dependent on a single foreign supplier. They are significantly more likely to see their margins erode. Get this. 83%, 83, of those businesses ended up absorbing the higher costs themselves. They felt they couldn't pass it on. We heard this really poignant quote from a California trade company owner. He said, "We've lost 2 overseas suppliers in the last 6 months because of tariffs. Quote, finding replacements in the U.S. costs more and delays everything." That's just a direct, painful hit to their stability and their future profits. It shows the real cost of this trade friction.
So, okay, faced with all this, what are businesses actually doing? Are they just taking these hits, or are they finding ways to adapt to protect themselves?
Oh, they are definitely adapting, and in some pretty smart strategic ways. The survey showed several proactive strategies emerging.
That's incredible foresight, really. True adaptability. But okay, it's not just tariffs causing headaches, right? Inflation. That's hitting everyone. But it must be a massive issue for small businesses with already thin margins.
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. The core finding here, a significant 39% of SMBs listed inflation as their single biggest operational challenge. Not just a challenge, the biggest one for nearly 2 out of 5. And the main culprits, they're pretty much what you'd expect. Fuel and transportation costs hitting logistics, deliveries for anyone moving physical goods, insurance premiums, that's a killer because it's non-negotiable overhead and it just keeps climbing. And of course, raw materials and product inputs. A direct hit to the cost of goods sold across almost every sector makes everything more expensive to produce or deliver.
It really is like a triple whammy hitting them. So how do they respond with pricing? That feels like an impossible choice. Raise prices, maybe lose customers, or eat the costs and watch your margins vanish.
It's a brutal balancing act, honestly. The survey showed 60% felt they had no choice but to raise prices. You have to offset those costs somehow to survive, right? But it always comes with that risk of customers pushing back or going elsewhere. But then, a really significant chunk, 38%, are absorbing the increases themselves, often because they feel they can't raise prices in their market. We heard from a Florida retail owner who put it so well. She said, "We can't keep raising prices without losing customers, but costs keep going up. We've already cut our margins in half this year." That just perfectly sums up the squeeze. It's a direct hit to their profitability, their sustainability. And the consequence for those who can't raise prices, it's exactly what you'd fear. Shrinking margins, growing cash flow problems. Their average margins dropped by a painful 11% year over year, according to the data.
11%. Ouch. So just like with tariffs, is inflation hitting everyone equally, or are certain industries or regions feeling it more?
Yeah, great question. And no, it's definitely not uniform. The data paints a pretty clear picture of who's most exposed. Again, construction and manufacturing are right there at the top. A huge 81% reported significant cost increases in raw materials. We heard from an Ohio manufacturing owner who said, "Our materials are 30% higher than last year. We've started bulk ordering and stockpiling just to stay ahead of the price hikes." See? Same strategy again, stockpiling. A direct defense against inflation, just like with tariffs.
So they're really feeling it on the input side. What about retailers?
Retailers, especially those selling imported goods, are feeling it intensely too. 74% experiencing higher product costs and increased shipping fees. Double hit. And then service-based SMBs, think hospitality, maintenance companies, they're facing the steepest labor cost pressures. A striking 69% cited payroll as their fastest growing expense. That's a direct result of the tight labor market needing to raise wages to keep staff. A California hospitality owner told us, payroll is outpacing our sales growth. We've increased wages 3 times in the last year just to keep our team, but it's unsustainable. That really highlights the wage inflation pain point for service businesses.
And regionally, does it differ between cities and rural areas?
It does, yeah. Urban areas tend to report bigger jumps in things like insurance and rent. Makes sense. Higher property values, higher cost of living generally. Rural areas, on the other hand, seem to struggle more with rising fuel and transportation costs, probably reflects longer distances for deliveries, for travel. So yeah, different regions feel the pinch in slightly different ways.
Okay, so besides just trying to absorb these hits or raise prices, what practical steps are businesses taking? How are they actively fighting back against this inflation pressure? Are there common strategies?
Absolutely. They're getting really strategic, actually. That 60% raising prices. They're often doing it carefully, maybe focusing on high-demand products first where customers might be less sensitive or where they have a unique edge. But more proactively, 24% are renegotiating supplier contracts or consolidating their vendors, trying to get better rates, streamline things. And then there's this interesting tactic. 17% are adding specific surcharges, like a fuel surcharge or a delivery fee. That lets them offset specific spikes without changing all their base prices. It can be a bit more targeted, maybe more transparent for the customer too.
Which brings us to another really fundamental challenge for any business, right? Managing your team, finding the right people. We hear so much about the tight labor market. It sounds like another huge hurdle for SMBs.
It absolutely is a persistent and profound challenge. The survey laid it out very clearly. 62% of SMBs reported having difficulty finding qualified workers. That's a major hurdle. It directly impacts their ability to grow, serve customers well, sometimes even just maintain quality. And in response, 59% have raised wages in the last 12 months, trying to compete for talent, trying to keep the people they have, which, like we touched on, feeds right back into that inflation pressure. Rising payroll becomes a huge operating expense. It's a cycle.
And what about minimum wage laws? Are those having a big impact too?
Yeah, they are definitely a factor. The survey found new minimum wage laws significantly impacted 15% of SMBs and moderately affected another 23%. That's not a small tweak for many. It fundamentally changes their cost structure, their hiring plans. We heard this really powerful story from an Illinois retail owner. He said, minimum wage increases have made it difficult to transition from owner labor to hiring employees. I'm back to working 80-hour weeks myself. That just vividly illustrates the personal costs, the sacrifice involved. And the broader consequence is exactly that. Owners who can't find or afford to expand their teams end up working punishing hours themselves, which limits growth, obviously, but also adds immense stress. Burnout is a real risk. It's a fundamental bottleneck.
80-hour weeks. That's just brutal. And it sounds like they're not just competing with each other for staff, but often getting outmuscled by bigger companies.
Precisely. Yeah, that came through clearly. We heard from a North Carolina manufacturing owner who put it perfectly. They said, we're losing good people to larger companies that can offer better benefits. We can't compete at that level right now.
Right.
And that really hits on the resource gap, right? SMBs often struggle to match those comprehensive benefits packages. The great health insurance, the 401k matches, generous paid time off that bigger corporations can offer. And those things really matter to employees.
So when they just can't hire enough qualified people, maybe to meet demand or even just to give the owner a break, how are they coping? What are the practical on-the-ground fixes?
This is where you really see their resilience, their ingenuity shine through. They adapt under pressure. The survey picked up some viral strategies. For instance, a Nevada hospitality owner, their solution was cross-training. They said, we started cross-training everyone. It's not ideal, but at least it keeps the business running when we can't hire enough staff.
Oh.
That's a perfect example of a practical, adaptive response, making the most of the team you do have, making them more flexible. It might not solve the root problem, the labor shortage, but it helps them keep the doors open, maintain service. It shows how resourcefulness can bridge those gaps.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From labor to something just as critical, maybe even more so. Financing. Access to affordable capital. It's the lifeblood, right? For investment, for growth, for just weathering unexpected storms, stabilizing operations. It feels like this could be one of the most dangerous kind of hidden threats for small businesses today.
It absolutely is. And the stats from the survey here are, well, they're quite stark, frankly alarming. A staggering 49%, nearly half of SMBs reported being denied a traditional bank loan or line of credit in the past 2 years. Think about that. That's not just an inconvenience, it's a massive barrier. It cuts off that traditional path for growth or even just managing cash flow bumps. And because of those denials, or maybe just the difficulty and time involved with banks, 70% have used alternative financing products in the last 12 months. Things like revenue-based funding, merchant cash advances. To clarify, revenue-based funding is basically getting cash up front that you repay from a percentage of future sales, more flexible than fixed payments. Merchant cash advances are similar, often tied to credit card sales. This just highlights how critical these non-traditional options have become. They're filling a huge growing gap left by the banks.
Wow, 70% using alternatives. And you mentioned something even more concerning about emergency reserves.
Yes. This was maybe the most alarming figure. Nearly 47% of SMBs reported having no emergency reserves. None. To cover cash flow disruptions. That means almost half are operating right on the edge. Extremely vulnerable to any unexpected expense, a slow season, any market shift. It's precarious. And when asked why it's so hard to get traditional funding, owners consistently pointed to high interest rates and much stricter lending standards from the banks. Those were the biggest hurdles. It's not just a challenge, it feels like a systemic issue, pushing businesses towards sometimes riskier or more expensive options.
So is this struggle for capital hitting everyone the same way? Or does it impact, say, newer businesses more or certain industries?
Definitely not uniform. The pain is spread unevenly. Startups and younger businesses, those under 3 years old, they're at the biggest disadvantage. 68% of them were denied traditional bank loans, which makes sense, right? They don't have the long credit history, the collateral, the years of revenue that banks want to see. It's incredibly tough for them to get that initial funding or scale up.
Okay, so new businesses struggle most with banks. What about industries?
Industry-wise, construction and manufacturing again, they report the highest reliance on alternative funding. 77% used revenue-based financing or merchant cash advances in the past year, probably because their work is often project-based. Big upfront material costs, variable cash flows. They need that flexible, fast capital. We heard from that Texas construction owner again who said, "Our cash reserves were drained after 2 big projects ran over budget. It's a constant scramble to keep the lights on without reliable access to funding." That just paints the picture perfectly.
And service businesses, are they different?
Service-based SMBs like restaurants, salons, they're more likely to be operating without those emergency reserves we talked about. 54% reported having less than 1 month of cash flow available. That's critical because their income relies on steady daily or weekly business. A slow week, an unexpected closure, it can hit them hard and fast. And regionally, owners in rural areas seem to face the longest waits for traditional loan approvals, maybe fewer local banking choices.
Right.
While those in urban areas report the highest cost of capital, probably reflects more competition for loans in those denser markets.
But they're not just sitting back waiting for a miracle loan, right?
Yeah.
What are they actively doing to get the capital they need, to keep going, maybe even grow?
No, they are absolutely being proactive, resourceful. Many are embracing what you could call diversified funding relationships. 42% maintain connections with both traditional banks and alternative funders. That's smart. It gives them multiple options, avoids gaps if one source dries up or gets too pricey. A significant chunk, 33%, are specifically using revenue-based financing. They like the faster approvals, the flexible repayment that ties to their actual sales. We heard from a Georgia landscaping owner whose story just nailed this. He said, "We've been denied by 3 banks this year. Without revenue-based funding, we wouldn't have survived the slow months." That shows how essential these alternatives have become, not just for growth, but for sheer survival sometimes.
And the survey mentions specific revenue products too.
It did. A significant 63% of those using alternative financing had utilized revenue-based financing specifically from their revenued business card or flex line in the past 90 days. Shows a clear reliance on those tools for immediate capital needs. And beyond just seeking new funding, a smart 19% are also focusing internally. They're tightening up their accounts receivable, basically getting better at billing and collecting money owed to them faster. That frees up their own working capital without taking on new debt. It's a really effective internal lever.
That makes sense. Getting paid faster helps a lot.
Absolutely. And looking at the patterns of when they draw capital, it's interesting. We see really high draw activity in those industries with big supply dependencies, construction, manufacturing, retail, healthcare, especially medical supplies. Frequent recent draws on their credit lines or alternative funds. That suggests ongoing cash flow strain, likely tied back to those tariff and inflation impacts hitting their costs. But service-led industries, IT services, mental health, education. They show lower draw frequency, suggest maybe less immediate cash strain from fluctuating material costs. And there was this clear spike in draws in July 2025. That timing strongly suggests it was linked to summer tariff costs kicking in, plus inflation compounding things, pushing them to need capital more urgently. We heard from a Michigan auto services owner who was just brutally honest about the trade-off. He said, "The interest rates are crushing us. We can't afford traditional loans, but alternative options keep us going even if they cost more. It's often that snark choice. Pay more for capital or risk a business failing."
Okay, so we've painted a picture of some pretty intense pressures. Tariffs, inflation, labor, financing. It's a lot, but it's not all doom and gloom, is it? Despite all that, the survey found something really striking. A strong sense of optimism, a belief in better times ahead.
It really is. It's a crucial counter-narrative. A remarkable 88% of the SMB owners surveyed said they are confident about the next 12 months. 88%. That's incredibly high, given the headwinds we just discussed. And it's not just talk. That confidence translates into action. 68% are planning to invest in business growth, buying equipment, expanding physically, or hiring. And even with all the hiring challenges, 58% specifically intend to hire additional staff.
Huh.
That just speaks volumes about their entrepreneurial spirit, doesn't it? Their belief in their own ability to navigate this and succeed.
It really does.
Okay.
It does make you wonder. Confidence is vital, no doubt. But are they truly prepared for what might come, especially for an economic downturn? Is confidence enough?
That's the crucial caveat, yeah. The survey dug into that, too. And while they're confident, 4 out of 5 admitted they are only somewhat prepared for a potential recession, and many are operating with those limited cash buffers we talked about. So it points to this potential vulnerability, right? The optimism is there, the drive is there, but the financial safeguards might not be fully in place for everyone to withstand a really severe shock. It kind of underscores the need to keep building that foundational financial resilience.
Okay, so given that gap between confidence and maybe full preparedness, what are the most forward-thinking businesses doing now? How are they actively building that resilience, preparing for the unknown, not just relying on optimism?
They're being pretty strategic about it. The survey highlighted a few key areas. A significant 32% are making a conscious effort to build larger cash reserves, bigger financial cushions to handle those unexpected hits. That's a clear lesson learned from recent volatility. Also, 27% are actively working to diversify their revenue streams, so reducing dependence on just one product or one service or even one big client, spreading the risk, making themselves less vulnerable if one area takes a hit. And 18% are working hard to negotiate longer-term contracts, both with their suppliers, maybe locking in prices, and with their customers, securing future revenue. It's all about creating more stability, more predictability in their costs and income. Helps them weather those fluctuations better.
That makes a lot of sense. Building buffers, diversifying, seeking stability. So connecting all this, what's the advice from owners who've really been through it? What's the pure wisdom coming from the front lines?
Yeah, this part of the survey is just invaluable. Real battle-tested insights from people living it every day. The number one piece of advice, echoed by so many. It sounds simple, but it's critical. Be more conservative with cash. Build those larger financial cushions. Prepare for the unexpected. We heard from that Ohio manufacturing owner again who shared this stark lesson. I'd tell myself to plan for the worst and expect it to happen. We nearly lost the business because we didn't have enough reserves. That's just a powerful reminder of how vital liquidity is.
Wow. Plan for the worst and expect it. Sobering. What else?
Another huge one. Focus on your core customers and team. Holding on to loyal customers, and maybe even more importantly, keeping good employees happy, that's seen as absolutely critical for stability, especially when things get tough. A Florida construction owner put it simply, keep good employees happy. They'll stick with you when times get tough. It really highlights the value of human capital, strong relationships.
Loyalty matters on both sides.
Exactly. Owners also stress the wisdom of scale slowly and steadily, a reminder not to overexpand too quickly. Make sure the demand is really there. Make sure the capital is secure before taking big leaps. Build sustainable growth, not fragile growth. And finally, tying back to supply chains and tariffs. Diversify suppliers and revenue streams. Don't rely too heavily on one vendor or one product line. Spread that risk. It provides crucial protection against shocks. A lesson learned the hard way recently by many. These aren't just theories, they're strategies forged in the fire of real-world challenges.
And there you have it. This deep dive, it really shows us, doesn't it? Small businesses truly are the vibrant, resilient backbone of the economy. Their ability to adapt, to innovate, just to persevere through these immense, complex challenges. It's not just vital, it's honestly incredible. The determination, the resourcefulness is genuinely inspiring.
Absolutely. We've uncovered so much today from the Revenue 2025 Small Business Survey. We've seen those relentless pressures, tariffs, inflation, labor, financing hurdles. But just as importantly, we've seen the innovative, practical ways they're not just surviving, but actively planning for growth, building resilience, and mixing that hard data with the real human stories. That gives us a much richer, more actionable understanding of what's really happening on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And this knowledge, it's not just abstract stats. Whether you're listening as an SMB owner facing this stuff daily, or you're an employee affected by it, or just someone who relies on these businesses every day,
Right.
which, let's face it, is pretty much all of us. Understanding this dynamic is really about understanding the engine of our economy and the amazing people who keep it running.
And that's exactly why Revenue is committed to continuing this work. To keep listening, keep learning from these experiences, and keep sharing valuable insights. Our goal is to make sure entrepreneurs, like you listening now, have the practical, up-to-date information needed to protect and ultimately grow your businesses, no matter what the future throws at you.
So as we wrap up, here's a thought to chew on. Given the incredible adaptability, the sheer confidence these small business owners show, even when facing enormous pressure, what hidden strengths might your business have, or maybe even your own career? Strengths you could leverage to navigate unexpected challenges in the year ahead. After hearing all this, what's one area of your own resilience plan you might want to revisit or strengthen? Definitely something worth mulling over until our next deep dive.